David Palandro, marine biologist.
My name is Emma Stacy and I'm a chemist.
I am Dr. Asad Zidan and I am a physiology professor.
Hi, my name is Ammar. I am a surgeon.
My name is Esther Mahariq. I am a dentist and I work in Germany.
Hi, my name is Evan Wesley and I am the Vice President for Student Activation for Third Project.
Hello, my name is Sarwat Al-Juti. I'm a neurosurgeon and working in Germany since 8 years.
Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Universe is Made of Stories, Not Atoms. Today we have a special guest, Dr. Jabre, with us today, and she's an assistant professor at Weill Cornell Medicine here in Qatar for Obstetrics and Gynecology. So it's really nice to have you on here today. You mentioned almost going into the arts. Can you elaborate further on why you eventually decided against that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for having me to start with. So when, I was one of those people who from the age of I can't even remember when I was a young child, everybody said what do you want to be? And I was always said, doctor, doctor, doctor. It was the only thing I could ever think to want to be. But then when I got to high school, I got very interested in art and drawing, painting, all sorts of stuff. And suddenly had a little bit of a crisis of faith and started thinking wait, do I actually want to be a doctor? Or is it just because this is the only thing I've ever thought about and considered? Or is it because my family wants to do it? So I was really confused about, is this really what I want or is it not? Because suddenly here was this thing, art, that I liked and loved just as much as medicine or science really. And that was the first time that had happened to me. Nothing ever really compared with science before that. So I actually prepared a portfolio and I was getting ready to apply to art school instead of to college, to a regular liberal arts college, and had both applications ready to go. My parents, of course, flipped out, but I didn't care. I was I'm going to do what I want to do. And then kind of at the last minute sort of said, you know what, I'm still unsure about what I want though. So maybe instead of closing doors and going to art school where I wouldn't be able to do medicine for sure, maybe I'll go to a liberal arts school and I can do art and art history, but still do my pre-med required courses so that if down the line I change my mind, I can in fact do medicine. And so that's what I did. I went to college and I took all my pre-med courses and I majored in art history and absolutely loved art history and still for the longest time thought, okay, I'm just going to go and get a PhD in art history and become an art history professor one day. And then that kind of changed. A lot of stuff happened in the first couple of years of college. I nearly failed out of college. It was a tough time. And so I had a little bit of an unconventional track to medicine. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was nodding
Yeah, so, I loved all of my art history classes. I was, completely convinced this is what I want to do. And I liked my science courses, but I had a lot of family stuff that was going on. Everything was kind of hard. My family was thinking about moving back to the Middle East and so on. So I kind of rebelled a little bit and decided to not go to my science classes and not take exams and lose my scholarship and et cetera, et cetera. And I remember I had to have required meetings with my pre-med advisor, which everybody who was signed up for the pre-med program had to meet with an advisor every 3 or 4 months or something like that. And at the end of my sophomore year, my second year of college, I went to my mandatory meeting and he said, why are you coming? Why do you keep coming? You're never going to make it into medical school. Just go and be an art historian. It's clearly what you like. So just go do that. It's fine. And he said, you're never going to get into medical school. And that was kind of the moment where I was oh no. Wow, I actually want to go to medical school. That was the second where I was oh, all of those doubts I was having, thinking it was my parents and society's influence and childhood fantasy. I was oh crap. Oh man, okay, I got to shape up. And so that's what I did. So like my next 2 years, I got like straight A's and did a master's, and I got straight A's, and then applied to medical school, and I got in and went to medical school and graduated with honors, and then went to residency, and then here I am. But it was like, I think, had I been sick that day and didn't go to that meeting, or had I like met with a different advisor or something like that, I'm not sure that I would have ended up where I am right now. So it seems sort of precarious at times like that I managed to end up here. So I'm grateful for finally making it.
That was a crazy story. Like, that was very interesting.
That was unexpected.
Yeah. And what's it called? When you said like how the professor like was like, you're not meant for med school, I was like, that's so mean. But I mean, I guess good thing in the end, it's what motivated you, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, he was right. There was no way I was going to get into medical school if I stayed on the track I was. So absolutely.
Yeah. And I also liked how you like talked about how like you should keep your options open, because you never know if you change your mind, like especially for our students who listen to our podcast,
Absolutely. I think like we're asked to make these intense decisions that have long ramifications at such a young age, when you're like, I haven't really seen enough of the world or know enough about myself to predict what I want to do with the next 50 years of my life. Exactly. So it was really, really difficult to like decide and make a end all be all decision. So I preferred leaving my options open.
Mm-hmm. I really like how you mentioned like young students who, still don't know what they really want to do, because, at ASD, the kind of general overview that we have for the road of medicine is very methodical. So take STEM classes in high school, and then major in bio, and then take the MCAT and apply to medical school. And that's how you become a physician. So a lot of students, they believe that this is the road that gives you the best chance in such a competitive field. And they really limit their options in terms of, taking different classes, because they feel as if this would negatively impact their application.
Yeah.
So as an unconventional medical school applicant, do you believe that worked in favor of your application, or did the atypical road to medicine discourage you from applying?
So I'm going to say no and no to both of those, and I'll elaborate what I mean. So I don't think that, doing it the way that I did it necessarily gave me a leg up or was an advantage in terms of getting into medical school, because I had to apply twice. I didn't get in the first time because like my GPA was terrible and so on. And so definitely it added time to my process of getting into medical school. And now as I'm older and looking at it from the other side, it was like a drop in the bucket. But at the moment when I was young and thinking like, oh my God, I can't believe I still haven't gotten in, I still have to do all of these things, it felt a little overwhelming. And I did do STEM classes in high school, and I did do the MCAT, and I said I majored in art history, but because the pre-med requirements, there's so many that are all science classes, I was actually just 2 classes away from a bio major. So in my senior year, I was able to add a bio major. So I ended up graduating with an art history degree and a biology degree, because I met all the requirements in the end anyhow. So, it was definitely the harder way. However, I think, and it didn't discourage me from going to medical school. It just sort of made me for the first time, understand that actually this is what I truly want, that despite all of these challenges, I want to be able to do this. And it made me work harder. So it didn't discourage me. And I think in the end, it was comforting, if that makes sense, because I felt more secure in my decision. And when I went to medical school, I completely embraced it. There wasn't doubts of like, oh my gosh, did I make the right decision? Is this what I should be doing? Or was I just kind of on this like track, like a runaway train where I didn't feel like I could stop? That was not the case for me, which I think is the case for a lot of students who take the traditional road. I had a lot of opportunities where I could have stepped off that track, or AKA fell off, or been pushed off the track, depending on how you want to look at it. Yeah. But I worked really hard to stay on it. So it helped sort of give me comfort that this is actually the right road for me.
And when you didn't get accepted the first time in medical school, did that discourage you, or are you like, no, it's fine, I understand why, but I know next time I'll get in?
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, okay, what do I need to do? I understand why you wouldn't let me in now, because I have a terrible GPA and I completely on paper look like I can't be trusted to be in medical school. I get it. But so what do I need to do to prove that I can be an amazing medical student and doctor and and so on. And that's what I did. I went and I got a master's and I graduated with honors and I wrote a thesis and all these things. And so it just made me work harder, I guess. Gave me focus.
Yeah. And then to like go more, dive deep more into like your specialty and what you ended up like going with, have you always, like when you knew that you wanted to do medicine, have you always known that you wanted to go into OB/GYN specifically? And what was the moment that you knew that this was the career for you?
That's a great question. I guess I don't really do things the conventional way for a lot of stuff. When I wanted to go, so again, going back to being a kid, wanting to be a doctor, even when I first started medical school, wanting to be a doctor, my vision had always been to like work in a small town, be a family medicine doctor, like see the entire family, take care of them for all of their lives, see them when they're babies, like see them when they're older, take care of like the mom, the grandpa, everybody. And so I sorry?
I said that's a very specific like desire from like a young age.
Yeah. I knew that I wanted to be like in family medicine and I wanted to take care of like the whole family and connect with patients. And that was like one of the real appeals for me was this human connection and long-term connection. And then I went to medical school and I also thought that I would never ever want to do surgery. Like surgery just didn't make sense to me. I thought it sounded awful and OB/GYN sounded awful because like it's just sounded super boring and kind of like doing the same thing all the time.
Yeah.
So I actually didn't want to do all of those things. And then I did my family medicine rotation in medical school and didn't like it. I was like, I can't imagine doing this for the next 50 years. This is a problem because this was my life plan. Now what am I going to do? And at that point, I still thought like surgery would be awful and OB/GYN would be awful, but I hadn't actually done those things yet in medical school. And then at the end of my third year, so medical school is 4 years typically in the US because you go after college as opposed to here where you go straight out of high school and it's a 6-year program. So at the end of my third year was when I finally did surgery and OB/GYN and I fell in love. Like I was just like, oh my gosh, I love being in the OR. I love being in the zone and operating and having to think about the anatomy and thinking about like, what do I do if it's this and that? And the little bit of adrenaline rush that you get being in the OR. And in the OB/GYN, what I realized was that I could actually have the kind of connection that drew me originally to family medicine, but just with women during their pregnancies, women in between their pregnancies, etc. So like a pregnant person, has on average about 15 prenatal visits, and that's in the course of about like 9 to 10 months.
Yeah.
So it's a huge amount of contact with one person in a short period of time. So you can develop like really close connections with patients, and that really appealed to me. I also like that I get to work with the mom and the baby, and I have to think about both of them, and what's going to be best for one isn't always the best for the other. So it sort of tested my just challenged me intellectually and ethically, and it kept me on my toes. So I really liked it, and I thought, okay, I guess I'm going to do this. This is my new life plan. And I'm so grateful that I had the wherewithal at the last minute during my 4th year to switch from family medicine to OB/GYN, because now I can't imagine being in medicine if I wasn't in OB/GYN. I totally love it. And I couldn't see myself doing another specialty.
Yeah. I mean, that's really cool. I mean, when I think of medicine, I really think of people who know exactly what they want to do from a very young age, and they kind of live up to that as they grow. And so would you say that a career like this is built by a lot of, unexpected change and sort of unexpected curveballs?
I think so. I definitely think so, because there's a lot of times in med school where we think, we have this like perception of what something is going to be, and then it turns out to be something dramatically different. And so you have to be adaptable and flexible and just pivot and shift to a new thing. And that was, the first day of my surgery rotation, I had a panic attack and had to call my husband, who had to like calm me down from the edge. Because I was so anxious about starting surgery and thinking I would hate it. And then little did I know, later that day, I would be walking into the OR and actually discovering something that I would love for the rest of my life. And it was completely unexpected. So I think it is really cool in that sense. And we experience a lot of things that are unknown to us as well. So exposure helps kind of help make decisions as well.
Yeah, for sure. And another question, how do you think the trajectory of your career changed over the years, like prior to finding out that that job with like a perfect work-life balance?
Yeah, so when I started out, my first job was in the same hospital that I did my residency. And I was like almost entirely clinical. So I did mostly patient care, and I worked with residents because it was an academic institution. So I had residents and I had medical students. So I did a lot of teaching, but it was always at the bedside while doing patient care. And so I was almost entirely clinical and had like, every once in a while I'd do a lecture at the medical school here and there, maybe a couple of times a year for an hour, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I wasn't really into the education piece. And then it just kind of crept up on me bit by bit. I started doing a little bit more education. Somebody would ask me to help out with something or other. And like really not without sort of realizing that I was doing more and more of it, I would be like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. It was kind of fun last time. And then a few years down the line, I sort of ended up doing a whole bunch more things. And then when the opportunity came up to come work in Qatar, I actually came to work originally at Sidra Hospital, which hadn't opened at that point. So they wanted to have clinicians who could help come and like organize the hospital and get it ready to open. And so I did that and I came here, but there was an opportunity to teach at Cornell. And so I was like, yeah, I like teaching. Let me just do a little bit of teaching on the side. And then again, I liked it so much that I started doing more and more and more, and eventually came and started working for Cornell. And now I've shifted from being like 90% clinical, 10% education to about 70% education, 30% clinical. So I still see patients at Sidra. I still go and do prenatal care and deliveries and surgeries, but I just do it much less compared to before. And that's worked really well for me because I love teaching. And in terms of like work-life balance, I think in both cases, I had good work-life balance. It was just a slightly different balance, but it worked for me. So I think that one of the things that I tell my students, and maybe this would be helpful to hear, is that there's like the specialty, and that has to do with the science of that kind of medicine, the types of patients that one will see in that specialty, the kind of stuff that you get to do in that specialty. And that's like, once you decide on that specialty, that's the specialty that you have for your whole life. But the job, which is like, what kind of paperwork do you have to do? How many shifts do you work? What kind of setting are you going to work in? What is your schedule going to look like? That's very variable, and you're going to have a lot of jobs in your life. And so as long as you sort of pick a specialty that resonates with you and makes you feel like, yep, this is the right thing for me. This is what I want to love to, this is what I love to do, and this is what I want to do. Then you can always find a job that has decent balance, because you're still doing the thing that you love, and that kind of helps outweigh the downsides of a job, because most jobs have some sort of downside.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're noticing like this trend of change in sort of your story. Like there is a lot of change of ideas, change of paths. Do you believe that, you finally found that sort of thing that you want to do for the rest of your life, or is that kind of hard to tell at the moment? Like, do you think that you could go back to being in a more clinical setting, or is this sort of the thing you want to do from now on?
Well, I could if I had to, but I don't really want to, because I think you're right. I finally sort of figured out what it is. That doesn't mean that things can't change and have a different way of existing, but still kind of within this role. And I think what I figured out, so I'll backtrack for a second, because when I was in residency, there's in OBGYN, there's like about 4 what's called subspecialties, meaning like after you finish your residency and become an OB and GYN, you can then do further fellowship training for 3 to 4 years and even like super specialize into something else. Like you can decide to do gynecologic oncology, which is just treating cancers of the reproductive tract, or doing high risk obstetrics, maternal and fetal medicine. So that, so there's like a few different subspecialties like that. And I think during residency, I kind of went through the motions of like, I want to do this one. Oh, wait, no, I want to do that one. No, wait, I want to do this one. And then what I realized is that I liked all of them. And so maybe if I like all of them, I should be a generalist, which is what I am now. I'm called an academic generalist OBGYN, because then I can do a little bit of all of those things and then do general OB and GYN care. And that's worked for me. But the other thing that I realized as I kind of went through all of this and started doing more and more teaching is that in many ways, I think what really resonates with me is being a teacher. And I happen to be a teacher that teaches medicine, but I would have probably also been happy had I happened to be a teacher that taught art history. So I think like at the core, I really, as long as I'm in a job where I'm doing some teaching, that's going to be what makes me happy. So for, if I had my way, no, I think for the rest of my life, I'd want to do academic medicine and medical education because I absolutely love it. I wouldn't want to go back to primarily clinical practice anymore because I would miss being a teacher too much.
Right. I mean, that is sort of a valid way of thinking. You mentioned that you would be just as happy as an art professor. And, we've kind of all heard the term that medicine is a form of art. Do you believe that is true? Do you believe that there are similarities between both fields?
100%. I 100% agree with that. I think that when we're starting out in medical school, we're taught so many things of like, okay, this is pneumonia, this is how you treat it. This is how you treat it. This is how it presents. This is the symptoms. This is how you test it. This is how you treat it. And it all feels so black and white. But what we're missing in those early days is that like, that's how it looks in the textbook. But when you try to take that and superimpose that on an actual living human being who has their own set of circumstances and their own like factors to consider and that things that affect the disease and vice versa, then it's suddenly the checklist of like XYZ, this is how you manage something or how you do something can become meaningless because you have to modify it and adapt it. And so this is where that art comes in of like, sometimes there's not good research on how to do something, or there's not good teaching in the past from how to do something, and you kind of have to figure it out on the fly. Or I feel like in OBGYN especially, there's a lot of art because as I mentioned before, I have to deal with the mom and the baby. And sometimes what's good for one is not good for the other. So like being able to strike a balance sometimes feels very artful and it is not like clear cut. So there's a lot of gray. And I think that the art is how to deal with the gray in the best way possible.
So as you mentioned, there comes like a lot of stress with this field. And so when you were doing like more heavily clinical work, how have you learned to cope with the stress that comes with a job like this? And now that you're a teacher, how have you like passed on these tips or skills to your students?
Yeah, I think most of us as physicians rely on one another a lot as a source of support, because if I have a really bad day or a bad patient outcome, I know that I can talk to a friend of mine about it without, saying anything about like the patient in particular or whatever, but still be able to like share my feelings around something, and they're going to be able to understand because they've probably gone through something similar. And so sometimes just being able to feel heard and understood helps cope with that. And beyond that, I think there is definitely very difficult emotional days, and having family support is also very helpful. I can't really talk to them about the patient side of things, or not the patient side, but like the medical side, or like explaining what happened and why it was hard or whatever, because they're not going to get all of that. They're not doctors. But just being able to talk about how I feel or how something affected me is very helpful. And that's what we tell the students too here.
So bringing this back to sort of our ASD students and a lot of students around the world, actually, we often, when we talk about wanting to go into the field of medicine, and this is a really early age, so all we really know about are the stereotypes of going to medical school. And a very common stereotype is that it is difficult and it requires like immense intelligence. So in your opinion, do you believe there are specific characteristics within certain individuals that make them more successful in a medical pathway, or do you believe that everyone or anyone who has the passion can be driven enough to get there eventually?
Yeah, I think it's you kind of hit the nail on the head. I don't think it's the important thing is not like the having immense intelligence. I don't think that's it at all. I think it's having immense discipline, because you have to be disciplined and organized enough to force yourself to sit down and study for long hours, to forego a lot of things. Because I remember certainly being in my 20s in medical school and having all my friends who are not in medical school be like out going socializing in the evenings. They would have to study for a few hours and then they were done. But like I had to study for many hours all the time. I missed a lot of activities on the weekends. I didn't get to do a whole lot of things. And that was the cost of what I wanted. I knew that like medicine was the dream and I was ready to give up a lot of those things to achieve it. But it was really hard to do that. And it took a lot of discipline not to be like, oh, it's fine. I'm just, I'll study later. And then you don't do well on an exam. So I don't think it's about intelligence. I think it's like, if you have the drive to force yourself to be disciplined, that's what it takes.
Yeah, I think that piece of information, I feel like a lot of our students will really benefit from that mindset, coming from someone who's already established, a great career and has been through all of these struggles. So I really appreciate you talking about that.
And do you believe that in the end, like all that sacrifice was like worth it for what you bought?
I think so. For me, it was. I don't think that every single person who ends up a doctor feels that way in the end. I'm sure some people kind of regret it, but then feel like, okay, well, it's the only thing I'm really qualified to do, so I guess I'll be a doctor. But for me, I'm really happy being a doctor. I actually really love my job. And so for me, in the end, like, yeah, it was worth it. And do I miss having missed out on those things? Yeah, I would have loved to do more of those things in my younger days, but I wouldn't get to do all of the cool things that I do now if I had done those things. So it is what it is, and I'm happy with where I am.
Sidra and I actually always have conversations about this because we know how much work like medical school is, and so we're always like are we really gonna think it's worth it? But I feel like it's great like hearing from you that you like are glad about it in the end, because like it's really encouraging, like I guess makes us more like firm in our decision.
Yeah. There's times in the, sometimes like I tell my kids like, oh, I'm really sorry. I'm going to have to work late tomorrow or tonight, or I'll be home a little bit later, or I have a 24-hour shift at the hospital. And they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, Mama. I'm really sorry that you have to be there late or you have to work for so long. And I was like, it's okay. I'm sure I'll be tired, but it's okay. I don't actually mind, because I love what I do and I love my job and I love getting to deliver babies and I love getting to teach medical students. So in the end, it is worth it for me and I don't mind it.
Yeah, I find your passion really, it really gives me a sense of security, because as a student, once again, like you hear a lot of these stories where it's like, don't go to medical school, don't do this, it's not worth it. You're going to spend your whole life studying. And so that new perspective of, okay, if this is something that you love and something that you're really, truly passionate about, you're going to find it worth it despite all of these, challenges that you're going to find.
Yeah. I mean, anybody who tells you like that it's easy, or that like, oh yeah, no, I love it, it's great, it wasn't that hard, that's a lie, because it was really hard.
Yeah.
But it was, like you said, it was worth it, and it continues to be worth it, because the benefit that I get and the like nurturing of my soul that I get out of being a doctor continues to be worth it, despite how it continues to be hard work. So for me, it's working out well, thank goodness.
So like you find that instead of saying, this is difficult, because of course we can't say this is an easy field, but instead of saying this is difficult and leaving it there, would you say like, this is difficult, but despite the difficulty of it, there are so many things about it that are enriching, and you will find it worth it eventually, despite how hard it's going to be.
Exactly. How worth it is makes you want to do the hard work, because it's that worth it.
And also just to, I guess like a side things to add, like for me personally, I've always wanted to be a doctor like you, but I've been set on like cardiology, But in the summer, my uncle let me shadow him, and or like my aunt let me shadow her, and she did, and she's a gynecologist, and she let me like see a cesarean section, and it was like life changing because I've always been like, I can't even imagine like why anyone would go into this field. So it's just like, sorry, but it's just because like I just couldn't imagine it, you know. But after I saw that, I was like, I think I want to be a gynecologist. Like, it was insane. And like seeing, like hearing your story, it's also like encouraging me like that, you know, it's a worthwhile field, so like fulfilling.
I'm going to let you in on a really big secret that nobody tells you in medicine.
Yeah.
OBGYN is the best field.
I'm beginning to believe that, especially from how passionate you are. Yeah.
You know, my favorite moment, it's super cheesy, but like nonetheless, it's still my favorite moment. And one of my favorite things about being an OBGYN is I feel so fortunate and so privileged and honored to be the first person to get to hold that baby. It comes out to the world, and I'm the very first person that gets to hold it and it like opens its eyes for the very first time. And like me and the baby, we make eye contact, and that moment is just so precious to me. And you don't get that in any other field. So like, and even though it's fleeting and it only lasts like seconds, it's so worth it for me.
Yeah.
That was exactly me when I saw like the baby like get pulled out. I was like, that's insane. Like a whole human would just got added into the room, like right in front of my eyes.
I like that. A whole human got added to the room. I'm going to use that from now on.
But yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jabre. We both really appreciate you taking time out of your very busy schedule to, kind of talk to us. And I'm sure all of our listeners are, going to be very motivated by this because, ASD has a lot of students who are interested in medicine. And so I believe that this adds a new perspective, and it might motivate those who were perhaps not, were perhaps hesitant towards going into this field. So we do really appreciate you coming on here.
Thank you very much. It's really been an honor to join you guys. I feel very, very lucky to have been invited. And you guys have my contact information. You can feel free to tell your peers that if there's anybody who has questions and just wants to like have a chit chat, they can always email me, and I'm happy to have a chat about things. No problem at all. And then, as you know, one of you guys, if not both of you, participated in the summer enrichment program. We also have a winter enrichment program at Cornell that's for high school students. So there are those opportunities also to keep a lookout for.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm gonna look into that then.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.